Hello, my name is Martina, also known as Marillion Cosplay, and today I'm gonna show you my take on an 18th century shirt. So this is a shirt I made for my historically accurate Captain Amelia cosplay from Treasure Planet. The first thing I wanted to do when starting to make the shirt is that I wanted to find a good pattern to follow. And I found a suitable one in the cut of men's clothes from 1600 to 1900 by Norah Waugh. And that thing that's good about this pattern is that I have how much an inch is on this side, and the thing I've done is I just zoomed into the PDF file and made 1 inch the same as 5 millimeters on my ruler, and then I've just measured out everything and then converted it to centimeters, since I'm not really good with inches. But luckily enough, I have this measuring tape with both, so the thing I've done, rather than actually doing the math and see how many centimeters is this when the pattern says is that many inches, so I'm just like, okay, it's 21, okay, 53 and a half. So that made it a bit easier. So I made myself a pattern with my measurements because I have scaled some things down. I've looked at some videos, looked at some pictures of actual shirts worn that time, and figured out how long the shirts are on the people wearing them. And obviously this pattern is made for a grown man and not a woman. So I'm obviously a bit shorter, a bit narrower, so I shortened the patterns and scaled everything down a bit, just to fit my size rather than the actual size the shirt is. So now I'm just gonna iron my fabric and just cut the pieces out from it. This pattern is fairly simple, everything is squares and pleating and not that complicated, so I'm not gonna make a mock-up or actually gonna make a pattern for this. I'm just gonna go straight to my fabric and sew this together. Start by pre-washing your 2 meters of lightweight cotton and then iron it. I'm then marking the width I want my shirt pieces to be, and then I use my scissors and make a small incision and rip the pieces. The reason I'm able to do this is because this is a woven fabric and the cross grain is straight all the way over, so I'm able to do this to all the fabric pieces for this shirt. Then I'm overlocking all of my fabric pieces just to be very unhistorically accurate, but mostly to prevent fraying. All of the overlocking will be hidden later on. I fold the front piece of the shirt over and put a pin as a marker for how long I want the front slit to be, and then I use my scissors and cut the slit as straight as I can. At the bottom of the slit I do a small triangular cut, and the corners of these triangles will be how wide the front slit will be. I'm folding the raw edges of the slit as narrowly as I can, twice over, and then pin it down. Everything is then secured by hand with tiny felling stitches. Next up, the shoulder gussets. The shoulder gussets are 2 squares that's 7 centimeters times 7 centimeters big. So the first thing I'm doing, just taking my iron and pressing all the overlocked edges inwards. Then I fold the square in half so it's a triangle and press that as well. Then I'm taking the shoulder reinforcement fabric, which is a strip that is 5 centimeters wide and 20 centimeters long, and I take the overlock edges and pressing the sides inwards. I do not press the edges. I'm pinning the front and back piece together from the edge of the pieces and around 16 centimeters in towards the center. This is the length of the shoulder reinforcement minus the length of the shoulder gussets from the point to the flat edge. Then I'm using my sewing machine and sewing that together. Pin your seam allowance flat and then sew that as well with the sewing machine. Next up, I'm pinning the shoulder gussets into the actual shoulder seam, and I'm encasing this opening into the edges that's already pressed, and I'm just putting the pins through all of the 3 layers. Then I secure the gusset in its place with tiny felling stitches, done by hand. I am pinning the armhole reinforcement fabric 6 centimeters from the edge of the bodice. So the reinforcement fabric is 7 centimeters wide and 60 centimeters long. Then I sew that in place with a sewing machine, but I'm careful to not actually fasten the thread with the machine, but doing it by hand so I don't get any visible thread fastenings. Then I'm using my iron to press the fabric towards the shoulder. You may notice that the reinforcement fabric matches the actual shoulder fabric perfectly. Pin your underarm gussets to the sleeve fabric. The underarm gusset is 10 by 10 centimeters wide. I'm pinning only one side. Then I use the machine and sew that down. Then I pin the second side and sew that as well. The fabric pieces for the sleeves are 80 centimeters wide and 50 centimeters long. I'm marking 10 centimeters from the bottom of the sleeve, which is the length I want the sleeve openings to be. Then I'm pinning from that point and up to the gussets. Sew that down with your machine. I am pinning the sleeve openings over 2 times to hide the overlock seam, and then I'm fastening it down with pins. I try to do this as narrowly as I can. Then I fasten this by hand with tiny felling stitches. I'm putting the sleeves flat so I can find the middle point that I want to match up with the shoulders. And then I use a contrasting thread color and just mark that spot. I'm sewing all the way around the sleeves from gusset point to gusset points. And I'm not fastening any of the threads, so I leave a long tail on both ends. I'm using the loose thread to gather the sleeves. Then I take my shoulder reinforcement fabric and just pin that down in the right spot on the shoulders. pin the marked shoulder point to the actual shoulder of the shirt, and then also pin the point where the sleeve meets the gusset 20 centimeters away from that point on both sides. Then I pin everything in place in between these two spots. I try to evenly distribute the gathers, but I have more gathers higher up on the shoulder and fewer at the bottom. Then I'm folding the sleeves over just to see that it's even in the front and in the back. Starting at one gusset point, I sew all the way around the shirt, and before I hit the gusset on the other side, I pin that down as well so I get it in one long seam. I pin from 10 centimeters from the bottom of the shirt. That's gonna be the side openings, and then I pin from that point up to the gusset, and then I sew that with my sewing machine. I fold the overlock seam on the sleeve reinforcement fabric inwards and pin that over the shoulders, encasing all the gathered fabric. Then I hand sew that down with tiny filling stitches. I take my shoulder reinforcement fabric and pin that down. And I then hand sew that in place with tiny filling stitches. I fold the overlock seams on the side openings twice, as narrowly as I can, and pin that down. I then properly fastened it with hand-sewn small filling stitches. The side gussets are square fabric pieces that are 4 by 4 centimeters, and I'm pressing these the same way I did with the shoulder gussets. I'm using small overcasting stitches and properly fasten the edges of the triangles down. I'm then inserting the triangles into the already hemmed side opening with an overcasting stitch. Fold your collar piece in half and mark the middle point of the collar piece. After that you fold it again and mark the middle point between the middle point and the edge on both sides. The collar piece is 50 centimeters wide and 15 centimeters high. Fold the back piece of the shirt over and mark the middle point of the back as well. At the same way I prepared the sleeves for gathering with my sewing machine, I'm doing the same now for the collar. The thing I'm doing now is that I'm just sewing from the front point until the gusset, stopping there, cutting the thread and starting after the gusset again and going doing the back piece. and stop before the gusset again, and then do the front piece. So I have 3 separate pieces to gather afterwards. Line up the middle point of the collar piece with the middle point of the back, and then line up the other markings with the shoulder points on the shirt, and then pin these places. Afterwards, you just distribute the gathers evenly in between these points, and then pin that down. Afterwards, I fold the collar over, fold in the overlock edge, and pin it in place, encasing the gathering around the neck. I decided to close the collar using a tie rather than a button, so the thing I'm doing is I take a 2 cm wide piece of fabric, folding both edges to the center and then folding it again before I pin it. I then pin that into the bottom edge of the collar, and then I fasten everything in place with tiny felling stitches done by hand. Then using small overcasting stitches and properly secure the ties. And now for the sleeve gatherings. I'm just using my sewing machine without fastening the thread and sewing all the way over the bottom of the sleeves. The cuffs for the sleeves are made from squares that are 20 cm wide and 5 cm high. I then pin the gathered sleeves to the cuff pieces and use my sewing machine to sew that down. I'm then folding the cuff over and then folding the overlock seam inside, encasing the gathered sleeves. And I'm then using small felling stitches to secure that properly in place. Mark where you want your buttonholes to go. For this project I decided to use 1 cm wide buttons, so I'm marking a 1 cm slit for the buttonholes. Cut through both layers to make the buttonholes, and make sure you follow the grain line of the fabric so you don't get that many loose threads. Make sure your buttons actually can pass through that hole. Properly fasten your thread and then poke the needle through the buttonhole and poke that up a couple of millimeters away from the actual buttonhole, and don't pull it all the way through, because you want to take the tails of your thread under the needle, up, wrap the thread around the tip of your needle, pull the needle through and tighten your thread in a downward motion, creating a small knot at the bottom. Repeat that step all the way around the buttonhole. Sew on your buttons and then your shirt is done. But what is an 18th century shirt without a cravat? So we're gonna make that as well. I've taken a fabric piece that's 20 centimeters wide and the width of my fabric, and then I'm folding the overlocked edges inwards and folding it over again and pressing that. I'm then sewing that down with machine. I'm trying to sew as close as possible to the inner edge of the pressed fabric, and at the edge I'm not fastening the thread with my sewing machine. I'm rather leaving tails and then using a needle to just pull one of the threads through and doing a knot by hand. Afterwards I'm encasing the thread edges in between the fabrics. So here's the finished look on the shirt. So you can see it's really big and poofy, and it's really comfortable to wear. I'm gonna show you how it will look with waistcoat. This is not the waistcoat I'm actually gonna use for this project, as that hasn't been made yet, but this is a waistcoat I have from a different project. So it will look not the same, but it will give you an idea on how it will look. And of course this shirt will be worn into the pants, so this will not be visible at all.